Russian forces are really being clobbered by all these Ukrainian drones and javelin missiles and so forth and so on, and that all this Western intelligence that's being provided to the Ukrainians is a huge force multiplier. If the Russian military begins to fall apart, I think you're then going to be in a very dangerous situation. And if at the same time the Russian economy is really beginning to hurt and is even on the verge of collapsing, I think at that point the Russians will think very seriously about trying to rescue the situation with nuclear weapons. Again, I'm not saying that's likely, but I believe the West is playing with fire here. And more importantly, what we're doing is we're leading Ukraine down the path to destruction. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, this is a catastrophe. We're in a situation here where the Russians feel that they can't lose. And the Americans and their European allies feel that they can't lose. It would be a humiliating defeat for the United States, and especially for President Biden, if we were to lose this war and Russia was to win a great victory. So we will go to great lengths to keep Ukraine fighting. You know, as I've often said, we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. And the Russians are going to fight like crazy to make sure that they don't lose. So the question you have to ask yourself is, where does this all end? And to argue it's likely to end by May 9th, I don't think so. And in fact, there are a number of reasonable people in the United States and in Western Europe who are arguing that this war is likely to go on for years. It may go on at a lower level than it's now going on, but this war could go on for many years. And if you ask me, this is a prescription for disaster, because the potential for an accident or some sort of incident that brings the West into the fight, or creates a situation where nuclear weapons are used, is always there. And a war that's long facilitates big trouble. Points. First of all, you compared this conflict in Ukraine with what happened in Georgia in August 2008. And you pointed out quite correctly that was a quick war. And of course, when the Russians took Crimea in March of 2014, that happened very quickly. There was hardly any fighting. This is a fundamentally different situation because the Americans are backing the Ukrainians. The Americans abandoned the Georgians in 2008, and the Georgians were on their own, and they lost quickly. In 2014, with regard to Crimea, we didn't help Ukraine fight to keep Crimea. Here, the United States and its European allies, or its NATO allies, are deeply involved in the fight. And as you know, the United States has an enormous amount of sophisticated technology. It's an enormously rich country, and it can do a lot to help Ukraine stay in the fight. And I think that's what's happening here. Now, with regard to Putin, Putin has to stay in the fight. He can't lose. It would be a disaster for him politically, but it would be a disaster for his country. Again, he views this as an existential threat. So Putin, in my opinion, is not going to quit. I don't see the Americans quitting. And I don't think the Ukrainians have the agency by themselves to stop this one. And for that reason, I find it hard to see how this one comes to an end anytime soon. Now, I may be wrong. I've been wrong on a number of occasions in predicting how international events will play out. And I hope that I'm wrong here. I hope that they work out some sort of peace agreement and this war is put to rest. But I would not bet a lot of money on it. And I don't know many people who think that I'm wrong on the implement. But the solution is that Ukraine abandons any interest in becoming a part of NATO and becoming a Western bulwark on Russia's border. That means that the solution is for Ukraine to become a neutral country and to work out some sort of modus vivendi with Russia. the fact is that Russia is a very powerful state. It's much more powerful than Ukraine. It can do enormous damage to Ukraine, as we're witnessing. And therefore, it's sad to say, but it's true. The Ukrainians really don't have much choice to accommodate the Russians to a large extent. Poking a stick in the Russians' eye is a prescription for disaster. So, a neutral Ukraine is the solution, and it's been the solution all along. But I don't see how you get a neutral Ukraine at this point in time, because a neutral Ukraine would be a victory for Russia. It would be a victory for Ukraine too. But the problem is it would make the Americans and their European allies very unhappy, because Ukraine would then not be in NATO. And furthermore, inside of Ukraine itself, it would make the far right very unhappy. This is why Zelensky has remarkably little maneuver room, because on his right are a large number of Ukrainians who don't want him to make any concessions to the Russians. And those far right elements in Ukraine, coupled with America's unwillingness to see Russia win in any way, means that Ukraine itself is unlikely to be able to push for neutral country.